Welcome back to the Dawn of Shades. I'm Gia Scott, and tonight I'm joined by Rachel Kaplan, and we are having a great conversation about urban homesteading. So, Rachel, you know, we've kind of heard about where you came from to arrive on the urban homesteading front. Where do you see urban homesteading moving to in the future?
Well, that's a good question. I think that I can't help but imagine that more and more people are going to start jumping on the bandwagon. I think that as resources, I have a view that resources are going to get more scarce and certainly more expensive, and I don't really see the economy headed towards any kind of radical recovery anytime soon. And I think that, and I also think that there's likely to be more and more kind of erosion of the social contract so that people have less of what they need rather than more. So I think when that starts happening, people are going to have more incentive actually to get involved in doing things more for themselves. So my hope, my dream, my fantasy is that, you know, more and more people are going to turn their lawns into gardens, and more people are going to get involved in saving their precious natural resources that rely on, and teaching their children about this, and really learning more, getting more connected with these sort of essential practices of being a human being that lives around other human beings. So right now we see just an incredible growth in this, more and more people joining the ranks of urban farmers, more and more people wanting to learn about this. My collaborating author, who teaches about 60 classes a year in homesteading, shows it's just no sign of it getting less popular. More and more people are interested in learning these things. So I just see it continuing to grow and to become more of how food is grown and distributed in the cities. I think as fossil fuel gets more less available and more expensive, the incentive people are going to have to figure out how to get their food closer to home is going to grow. So, you know, we see things like in cities like Detroit. I don't know if you're aware of what's happened in Detroit. You know, it's like a really broken down, emptying out, very poor city where there were tons of empty buildings and empty lots. And people just started homesteading with a vengeance in Detroit. And now it's one of the most homesteaded urban areas in the country. There's just farms and fields and repurposed houses that are all done with this do-it-yourself, small-scale ethic that's part of the urban homesteading way. So it's a really beautiful example of how people are sort of turning adversity into prosperity. It's happening in post-Katrina New Orleans. There's tons of this happening in places where people don't have everything they need and aren't going to be getting what they need anytime soon and making it happen for themselves. So I think that some of these cities are like examples of how it's going to go. It's like, I think it's just this beautiful example of human ingenuity and adaptability in the face of adversity. So that's how, I could be wrong, but I hope I'm right.
You know, when you look at, you know, some very basic facts, okay, Detroit, I know I read an article, I think it was a couple of years ago now, about how in the inner portion of the city where there's still lots of low-income housing, there were no grocery stores within walking distance.
Right.
So if you didn't have a car, you were forced to do your grocery shopping at the equivalent of a C-store or convenience store.
Yeah, right.
No fresh fruits or vegetables, very unhealthy diets.
Yeah.
You know, lots of accompanying health problems ranging from obesity to, you know, onward. Okay, and, you know, there was a movement to bring these mobile produce trucks, essentially, into the area that actually people could buy things without having to have a car or hire a taxi to drive a long ways and so forth and so on.
Right.
In addition, this year, everybody's seen it on the news about the drought that has hit the United States.
Yep.
And the predictions that it's going to affect everything from the ethanol they put in our gas to the prices of our food.
Absolutely.
There's nothing like economic incentive to get people to do something.
Well, like I said before, I don't see the economy getting better. I think that, everybody, it's getting better. It's like, it's not getting better. They're not. And nothing that's happening at the levels of government, either locally or nationally, is really going to make it get better. So as long as we continue to give, well, anyway, I'm going to start getting too political perhaps for this conversation, but, I just don't see that it's going to get better for most people, for the majority of people. And so, like you're saying, push is going to come to shove. People are going to have an economic reason to grow their own food. And you do save money. Once you set up your garden, there is an investment initially to set up a garden, especially if you're growing, in raised beds or you need to get certain tools. But once you have those things and you get sturdy, good equipment for yourself, it is absolutely a money saver to grow your own food. That's why the Victory Garden was so important during World War II. People started growing their own food. That was the way people participated in the war effort, so that they could provide for themselves and their families while there was scarcity and reductions in commodity because of the war. So I don't really think that that's going to change anytime soon. And there's a lot of unemployment in this country, and there's a lot of people who are working less than they could be or should be, and who are making less money than they need. And it's sort of, again, a kind of interesting thing. If you don't have a job, learn to grow your own food. You got time, and it's something you need 3 times a day. It's something your family needs, and you can turn it into an opportunity instead of a problem. So I think that's part of the spirit of this. Is there's opportunity here for learning skills and for growing a positive life, even in the face of some difficulties that we're not sure exactly how we're gonna work out of. That's really not clear right now. So. Right.
Well, I've been telling people for ages and ages, if you're not sure about gardening, you're not sure you want to get involved in edible gardening, or you don't want to make any commitment, the most expensive, I'm talking to foodies, of course, but the most expensive thing in the grocery store is your fresh herbs. You price those per pound, and it's like gold. Mm-hmm. Really, because you get this little teeny tiny bundle for $3 or $4, and that's it. You want to, make an impact on your budget, you can immediately feel it. Replace some of the plants in your flower bed or in your window box, herbs.
Yeah, that's one of the easiest crops to grow in the whole world. Herbs are super easy. Super easy.
Right. And, they're not fancy hybrids usually. They're pretty close to what they were originally, and they are easy. And, granted, not everybody can raise every one they use, but most people can raise at least some.
Absolutely. Another way to save money, of course, I find that the most expensive things I buy are meat, animal products, and so reducing our eating of meat is good on lots of different levels, economic and ecological. Both are really impacted by that. Now, I know people love meat, and many people are never going to give up eating meat, and that's fine. But if economics is what spurs you on, having a higher plant-based diet rather than a meat-based diet is both healthier for your body and your pocketbook and your world. So I think
my doctor my doctor's been making that statement for a while. Eat less meat. Don't eat any processed meat. Don't avoid processed foods, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, and also avoid factory farm meat.
Yeah. The closer it is to where it was raised, the less it's been processed, shipped, et cetera, and the lower cost it should be.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and there's so much information now about sort of the high ecological cost of some of the ways animals are grown in this country, the feedlots, and the animals are basically being tortured. They're not being given food that they are adapted to eat. They get sick. They're crowded into super unsanitary conditions, and they're unhealthy, and it's toxic. It's toxic for the animals. It's toxic for the land where they grow. It's toxic for our bodies, and so I think starting to make choices that are one of the things in permaculture that we talk about is we talk about these ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. So we try to make decisions that have this ethic of taking care of the earth, taking care of people, and making sure that the resources are distributed fairly. And so if you have an abundance, you don't hoard it, you share it. And that's kind of like this radical concept in this country. You get called a communist when you say stuff like this, but it's not communism. It's sort of common sense, actually, to share what you have when you have an abundance and then expect to receive.
Anybody who has suddenly had, this huge bounty of produce from their garden. One year for me it was cassava melons, which were very expensive in the grocery store. But suddenly I had so many that I was not only giving them to take one, I was feeding them to my chickens.
Right.
Simply because I needed to get rid of them before they started fermenting it, because fermented cassavas smell real bad.
It's a good feeling to have more than you need and to share it. And so when we start making those choices, like, organic gardening in your backyard is a choice that has earth care in it and people care in it. And when you have that kind of abundance, like you're just talking about, also fair share in it. So those are, once you start really thinking about those ethics and living that way, which for me has been part of the big transformation that the homesteading way has brought to me, is like to really try to think about that. And there's so many levels at which you can make decisions, so many decisions that you can apply those ethics to, that really can change the way your whole life looks. And so there's something like, so once you start getting to the ethics of our choices, which I think sometimes we think it doesn't really matter what we choose, and it doesn't really matter what we do, but it's really not true. Our actions do matter, and the choices we make about how we spend our time and how we spend our money and, what we teach our children to do and what we do with our families, those are all really consequential. That creates culture, that's what creates community, that's what creates our lives. And I think we live in a world where, because the problems are so big and because the culture is so large and so diverse, it's easy to feel disempowered, and it's easy to imagine that what we do doesn't make a difference. But that is just not my experience, and I think there's like a cynicism and a kind of sense of defeat for a lot of people, that it's like, oh, I can just keep doing this because it doesn't really matter, but it really does. And I think when you get involved with things as small as a seed and soil microbes and things like that, when you see like, well, what you put in the dirt really affects the seed, and how you tend the seed really affects the fruit, and the fruit really affects your body, you can really get the interconnection between yourself, your attitude,
and as you plant things, you discover there's a more relationship between the plants than you realize. Like in my case, having Armenian cucumbers too close to cantaloupe. Okay, right. For anybody who's never done that, your Armenian cucumbers are actually a melon. They just taste like a cucumber until you plant them close to cantaloupe, and then they taste cantaloupe. And then your cantaloupes taste like sweet cucumbers, and it's really not nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's not a good combination.
That's good to know.
And we don't realize a lot of these relationships, and it sort of reflects back into society, too. We often are not aware of the interrelationship we have with our neighbors, our city council, our state representative, our state government, and so forth and so on. I hear it a lot this year. Why bother voting? Because they're all a bunch of crooks anyhow.
Right. Yeah.
And if we all take that, if we all take that sort of really apathetical look at life, I mean, why get up in the morning? The same thing's going to happen today. The sun's going to set. It's really not, apathy is not a good route to take, whether you're gardening or choosing your political candidates.
Right. I agree. But I think that there is something disempowering about the scale of our culture. It's hard to imagine that it makes a difference, that one person makes a difference. And I think that that's, for me, one of the things that I've gotten from living this way. It's like, I do make a difference. I make a difference in my family. I make a difference for myself. And I've made a difference in my neighborhood and by And not just by writing the book. Like, a book takes you outside of your house, right? Like, you found me, and there's people, you know, who I've talked to all around the country about this. And so that's definitely made some sort of an impact. But just by like converting my front lawn into a garden, all the people who walk on my road, I live on a road that people really like in our town. People take a lot of walks here, and so it's kind of interesting that way. It's like, people stop and they talk to me and they think about it and they ask me questions, and every so often I put signs on my front lawn that's like, this garden is watered 100% with gray water. Ask me how. You know, it's like I've been a bit like that, you know, because I sort of have that bent. But it's good to see that the things you do. It's good to see the connection between, you know, what you do and the impact of what you do. And sometimes when we work at tasks that are more abstract than gardening, like gardening is very concrete, very practical, and you can really see how one thing leads to another over time. And something really satisfying about that, and really, for me, has made me feel better in my life. You know, not so worried about the future and not so anxious. It's really like, wow, this one thing does lead to another, you know, and the seed really does grow into a plant and really does bear fruit, and you really can pick it. And
it really does
really
spread.
Cool.
And that's another thing that I've told people. You know, you're not happy with the way your neighborhood looks. You know, maybe you've got junk cars and trash and broken toys laying around, you know, all up and down the street. If you clean up your yard and plant some flowers, it spreads.
Yep,
it's like a good kind of cancer, you know. It does.
Yeah,
it spreads.
It does. It does. It really does. So that's another way that there's, like, by getting involved in practices that have connectivity in them, that make you feel connected to life in a certain way, it helps you connect to other things, to other people, to things that happen in your town and in your city. And there's something, you have more power than we think. And we have the power to choose, really, how we act and how we live. And that's what we got. You know, so
yeah. Well, you know, I guess because of the fact that, you know, so often I've seen that you spruce up your house, you paint it, you clean up the yard, you trim the grass, you plant some shrubs and some flowers, and it starts to spread up and down the street and around the corner. You know, one person did have an impact.
Yep.
You know, somebody's got to do something, or it's going to continue to deteriorate until this becomes one more blighted neighborhood. Well, you know, when you compare that small scale of your neighborhood with the nation, the same thing happens. It starts, you know, with somebody's house, somebody's neighborhood, somebody's town, and it spreads.
Right, and I also think, like, I don't know that we're wired as people to really be able to conceptualize of a nation, or certainly not of the planet, you know. I think it's just too big. I think we're really wired for smaller settlements and for knowing well a number of people and sharing work and time and experience with a kind of finite number of people. And I think that's one of the ironies about it, of this happening in the urban areas, where I think the sense of alienation can be high. You know, people don't feel that connected to the land underneath their feet. They don't necessarily know their neighbors. There's a lot of shut-inness in cities, and this is a kind of opening up to take on some of these tasks and to do them with the people around you. I think it's important. Yeah,
coming from the country and moving into an urban environment, I have to admit I had never experienced that kind of anonymousness.
Right.
You know, it's just you vanished into the landscape. Nobody noticed you. Nobody looks at you. Nobody speaks to you.
Yeah.
It was really strange coming from somebody who came from, you know, an extremely rural environment. It was, you know, when people talk about culture shock, it was, because the social mores were so different.
Yeah.
The way you interact with strangers was so different, and it was a huge change.
Yeah.
And so being involved in that way and attracting attention that way sort of removes that fakeness that a person would normally experience.
Yep, I agree. It's another good stacking function of homesteading.
Yeah. So, you know, you must have some pet projects that you are working on now. What kind of pet projects do you have going on right now?
Well, let's see. As we've been speaking, I've been shelling beans that I'm going to have as my drying beans for the winter. So I've been doing lots of little projects. I came home today and I made some elderberry cordial. I put the elderberries in some brandy and I stuck it in the closet, and in about 6 or 7 weeks I'll have some good medicine for the winter. So I do lots of different I kind of have my seasonal projects that I'm working on. I started doing a lot of canning of the nectarines and the peaches that are available right now, and I have been I have a little bit of a problem with my chickens. I'm trying to figure out how to best keep chickens in our small yard without them in a garden. So I'm trying to decide if I'm going to invest in sort of creating an area that they're fenced into totally, so that I don't have to wake up every morning and put them in every night so the raccoons can't get to them and so they can't get out. But I haven't quite made a decision if I'm actually willing to do that bit of labor. So those are some of the things I've been thinking about, and I work with part of my work right now is trying to figure out how to kind of spread the word about this, but also do some teaching and educating of people, and kind of back to the other work I do as a therapist. Just people come to me all the time who want to live better, who want to have more, balance and calm in their lives. And I myself have gotten so much from this part of my life. So I'm trying to figure out how to integrate the homesteading, earth-based work with the healing, more mind-body based.
Well, I can understand that. Recently it's been driven home, you might say, that most people work to support their house.
Right.
Really. And I'm kind of looking at this and I'm going, I think it's backwards. You're home, why you go to work 60 hours a week?
Right.
Do you really need that?
Right.
And by scaling back, by saying, I don't need as much, but I need more time to devote to the things that I enjoy, I think I'm finding greater satisfaction myself. Right. And I'm probably not alone, that you're kind of looking at this and you're going, especially after all these foreclosures in the past few years, people that have invested vast amounts of time and effort in their home and still ended up losing it. Yeah. And you're going, did you really need a $500,000 home?
Right.
I mean, wouldn't you have been better off with something more modest that you could afford?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, so I'm questioning a lot of the basic consumerist ideas that American society has really indoctrinated into them.
Yeah, I think the housing crisis has really brought that home for people. Like, I've had some friends say to me who've lost their homes, they're like, yeah, we bought it. We bought the American dream. This was going to make it all okay. We're going to invest our money in this house. And it was a big fat lie, It stopped being worth what we paid for it, and it stopped. It's ridiculous, And, of course, in California, the properties were so overinflated in value and so overvalued. And, anybody who spends $800,000 and then worries that they're not going to get that money back, I'm just like, really, my heart is not bleeding for you people. It's a little crazy to ever imagine that anything could be worth that much money. It's like,
well, I'm trying to think, is 4 walls and a roof really worth 30 years of your life?
Yeah, that's partly why this whole thing about being a renter, it's like, it's not the worst thing to be a renter. It's really, really not so bad. And
well, here in Mississippi, property values right now are not, there's lots of homes under $30,000.
Yeah,
which makes them very affordable, assuming that you have
I would buy a house
something
for that
to pay for.
Right, for sure.
And
under $30,000, I'm so jealous. Here it's like you can't find anything for under $400,000.
Yeah, so there's still lots of homes. Granted they're not going to be big fancy homes. A lot of times they're going to be, rather interesting homes with character. Which, with me, okay, I have to admit, I like character. Cookie cutter ranch house had all the appeal of soggy milk toast from yesterday.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. It was like, oh, this is boring. For other people may not feel that way, and that's why there's, many kinds of houses on the market. But, we just spent from April until now, house hunting. So months of house hunting. And last week, we, as they put it in the industry, we went under contract. We'll close in a couple of weeks now.
Okay.
And, you know, is this our dream house? No.
No.
It's a very modest post-war cottage. And the yard's not too small. It's not too big. I mean, we looked at some. I said, no, that's not going to work. There's not even enough room to park a car or the dog either, you know. That's too small. Or, you know, there was something else wrong. But eventually we found one that had the basic things that we were looking for, and it is very modest, on everything. And it's got some great things about it, too, you know. Like, I love the fact it's got a workshop, which some people may find that a woman who's thrilled about a workshop is a little strange.
I love a workshop, and a greenhouse, and a barn. That would make me happy. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't find room for a barn, but there are 2 small sheds, the workshop, and a carport. And then some yard left over, too. So, you know, yeah, it's not bad, right?
Yeah.
And we're not going to spend the next 30 years of our life struggling to pay for it, because I'm really going, I don't want to spend 30 years of my life to get this. You know, in 30 years, I'll be too old to care, you know, really. So, you know, I think there's a lot of people like me that are looking at that American dream. Now, granted, we just finished up a longer than we expected experiment at living in our travel trailer. And for those who are considering small houses or marriage, live with somebody in a travel trailer for 6 months, and you'll know whether that relationship has any cracks in it. You'll find them in those close quarters. Mm-hmm. You know, the travel trailer was not ideal as a small house. Okay, I'll tell everybody that right now. It was very poorly designed for us. You know, that's the thing, is that, you know, the travel trailer is designed for temporary housing, and when you live in a small space, you need to have it be well designed. But the portability concept is great, and there are some portable small houses that there's designs out there that people can look at. In fact, we had a guest on a couple of weeks ago. We talked about it. But, you know, by scaling down what you want, I mean, in travel trailer, you had to decide what you really needed and what you didn't, because there's not room. You know, we have three dogs and 2 cats, 2 of us. There's not any extra space. So, you know, it's something to think about, is whether or not you really need that, you know, and do you really need all those things? Right. You know, because there again, you know, working to support something that you rarely get to enjoy because you're always working to support it
makes no sense.
No, it really didn't make any sense to me. And
that's the other.
Go ahead.
The other thing is that, you know, I think when you make that choice, like instead of spending my whole life out of my house, making money to support my house, if you can bring your economy into your house more, and not that you're going to make your whole living homesteading, but if you can find ways to need less money and to do more of the things you need to do yourself, then that's what your life is. You get to do things yourself. You get to support your human needs in a really much more satisfying way than going out and trying to make enough dollars to take care of all your needs. So I think that is a shift that's happening, and I think it's happening for lots of different people, but partly because of what's happening economically in the country. There's literally not as much cash to be had, and not as many jobs.
And wages, and I think, you know, especially here, are not really very good right now. And so I look at these, especially, you know, wives and mothers, you know, they're paying a child care provider and going out to work. I said, are you really making enough to make this worthwhile to you? Because by the time you pay $4 or $5 an hour for child care, figuring your expenses of clothing and makeup and hair and all that in your car and you're traveling, and then the fact that you don't get home until, you know, the kids are already starving, so you end up buying fast food. Right. So you're spending more on your food budget. Right. Do you have anything left over to show for it? You know, I really question whether or not
also it erodes
out.
Right, and it erodes the relationship between the family members. If both parents are out all the time trying to make enough money to take care of their kids who are being taken care of by other people, it's nonsensical. It's not.
Yeah, and
it's also hard for families. It's hard to make enough money to live. Things are very expensive. Even things are expensive, and it's wages are low and prices are high. So it's
yeah. I know that when I had more time than money, I tended to cook healthier food, but I cooked it from its purest form. I started with the dried beans instead of opening a can, and so forth and so on. So it cost less. It just took more time.
Right.
And then when I was working a lot and had more money and no time, well, the can or the frozen bag from the store or whatever, or the fast food. A lot of times it would boil down to fast food because if you're working 18 hours a day, you're not interested in cooking. I don't care how much you like cooking.
No. And
all you want to do is sleep.
I have people ask me that question a lot, like, who's got the time for this? And I live in the Bay Area of California. It's very high-pressured, and people do work a lot. And sometimes I think also because it's a fairly progressive area, people feel like they should do this, or they feel guilty for not doing it. And I think it's really reasonable for people. Everybody's family is different. Everybody's doing different things. And so you really want to take on what you can take on successfully, and that can give you some pleasure and some abundance, not another job that you have to do to be a good person, because that's really not the spirit.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of from the supermom era where you were supposed to have the full-time, job and make lots of money. You were supposed to be involved in take your kids to every activity known to man, have the perfect house, the perfect yard, garden, bake your own bread, sew your own clothes, and folks, it don't work. You can't do it. You will have a nervous breakdown, and it still won't be done.
Yeah.
And so I had to say, okay, we can do this, and we can't do that, and
you have to
sort out priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. For us, we had horses, and so those were very huge consumers of time. So I could easily say, okay, we have horses. We can't afford time or money for Little League and gymnastics and dance and every other activity under the sun. We do horses. That's what we're doing. That's what you wanted to do. That's what we're doing. So, you had to balance out things. And I learned things like, okay, yes, I can shovel manure, but do I really want to spend the only 2 days that I could possibly ride shoveling manure all day? No. I'll pay somebody $20 and they'll shovel the manure for me, and I get to go do what I want to do.
Right.
So, you have to pick and choose what is worthwhile, what isn't. It wasn't worth $20 to me to shovel the manure that loaded in my truck, and I took it home and put it in my garden, but I didn't have to do the shoveling.
Right.
Yeah. So you do. You just you figure out what is important for you, because everybody is unique. I wanted my horse manure. Not everybody wants it.
I would take a load of that horse manure in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I used to go get horse manure. I would go to the sawmill and get sawdust. And, the two together, as far as I was concerned, it was free soil amendments. Just my time.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah. So before I forget, we have not told the audience yet where to find your website.
Thanks so much. So the website is www.urban-homesteading.org. The hyphen's really important. If you don't put the hyphen in, you get somewhere else altogether. So it's urban-homesteading.org. And you can buy the book from us there, and you can learn more about the book, and you can read some parts of the book, and there's a little blog, and you can sign up for the newsletter, and you can buy the book there. Did I mention that you could buy the book there?
And for those listeners who are thinking about buying the book, by buying the book off their website,
you can buy the book for less.
You can buy it for less elsewhere, but
you support us.
Actually goes to the authors. So
yeah, if you buy from us, we actually get a little bit of money, and if you buy from Amazon, we get nothing. So we really appreciate when people buy it from our website, because then we get.
A lot of people are under the misconception that once an author has a book published, they become like instantly wealthy and can compete with the likes of the richest stars in Hollywood.
No, it's terrible. But our book is doing well. It's going into its third printing in the year, and it's this next version of it's going to have an index, and hopefully every single solitary typo has finally been found, and it's just better. We just made it better. Every time we get to reprint it, we change it a little bit, and we fix it a little bit. And it's a work in progress, but it is it's going to be great.
Yes. So when is the third edition expected to be out?
Well, it's actually not the third edition. It's still in the first edition. The third printing should be...
Third printing, okay.
I think sometime in the fall, but there's plenty of books that are still available. We don't have to wait for the third printing. There's still plenty of books that people can buy. So they're out and available. People can also ask your local bookseller if you want to do it that way. You can just ask them to carry it, and that's also a great way to get the word out so other people can see it also, sitting in the bookstore.
And tell your library, too, to have that book on the shelf.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it would be a great resource for any community to have in their library. So, in all of the work that you've invested into this particular book that has not made you rich and famous, is there a book, too, going in the works yet or even being thought about?
I am thinking about another book that's more about the combination of the healing work that I do and the earth-based work that I do, the connections between the two of them. So sort of I'm not exactly sure how to frame it yet. It's sort of like a functional, practical, spiritual compass for living in the 21st century. So, it's more about healing and about the process of change, how people change, and how we can remain balanced and whole in this funny time that we live in. So I don't think it's going to be so much of a how-to, and it won't be only about the garden or the homestead, but it will include a lot of those skills that are in the book that we already read.
A guidebook for personal evolution, huh? That's what it sounds like to me.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a good tag, a guidebook for personal evolution. I like that. Eco-evolution.
Well, I regard life is really about a personal evolution. Am I the same person I was 30 years ago? No. I think I'm better. I hope I'm better. Events that you have no control over will affect you as you live your life. Probably one of the most profound effects for me was losing a son. When he died, it made a huge change in who I was and how I regarded the world. Because before I was like everybody else, I sort of took tomorrow for granted.
Yeah.
And after an event like that, tomorrow might not happen. So because of that...
That's sad. That's the worst loss.
You really change your focus on what's important, what's not. Is it really important to spend so much time working? Or are the people in your life more important than in your life? And your priorities shift and change. Now, did it change dramatically for me? No, because I was really always more oriented towards the relationships with people. But it made me realize sometimes how quickly you can lose something like that. Yeah. So with that realization, it made me more focused on the relationships in my life versus the stuff. Working so many hours to support the stuff, because that's what it boils down to. You start supporting the house, or the household, or the stuff. I always call it the stuff.
The stuff.
But, when you start working to support the stuff and the people become secondary to that, one of the saddest things I can remember was my father was concerned about me bringing my son over when he was little because he was hyperactive and he was afraid that he was going to damage something. Now, in the long run, was the stuff more important? I don't know, it was sort of, it went hand in hand with a not real positive relationship. He really had nothing to do with my son. He never knew who he was because he was more concerned off.
Right.
Was that fair to either side? He missed out on somebody I thought was great.
Yeah.
And that is kind of sad in a way.
Absolutely
that the stuff
sad.
was more important than the person.
It's totally sad. It's like the definition of sad. Don't you
Right.
think?
And trying to explain these things, because like my daughter doesn't remember, that discussion between my father and I. She probably wasn't even there. But, she's like, why didn't we see Grandpa more? Well, he just really wasn't into kids. She can't even really get a grasp of somebody that was like that. She doesn't have any idea because it's so alien to her in the way our lives were that, understanding it is she would fare better to understand, a foreign language actually, because it's totally foreign to her. And because, I did sort of shift that focus that the stuff wasn't what was important. It was the people.
Right.
And, in the whole urban homesteading thing kind of focuses on that. It's about the interrelationship between, the growing things and your neighbors and other people involved in urban homesteading and the seed and so forth and so on. It makes the stuff become just stuff.
Yep. It does. It really does. It's not what's most important.
So, I like the philosophy behind it, and I can easily see the relationship between healing and, the whole concepts, held in urban homesteading.
Yeah, they are.
Or small town herbs.
Yeah, I think once you really get involved in the sort of the ethics and the principles of the practices, it really helps you see that this is it is a practical, material thing, but it's also a spiritual and philosophical choice about, how we live and how we see ourselves in the world and what we want our lives to be. And I think the poignancy of the story you tell about your son and how it has helped you value experience with other people and love and connection, that's pretty deep. That's
and too when you look at Katrina, because I was one of the people
Right.
that had evacuated before the storm, and out of all my friends, everybody I knew, I was the only one that didn't lose everything. I had the least to lose, and yet I was the one that didn't lose anything. And that kind of made you feel guilty, in a strange way, because it does.
So you were in New Orleans at that point.
Yeah, I wasn't physically there for the storm. I had left. I was actually in East Texas. But, the thing was, is I'm, talking with other evacuees and whatnot. Some of them, the ones I think that were most emotionally affected were the elderly who had lost everything.
Yeah.
And they really couldn't grasp it because everything that mattered to them, all their stuff, was gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you put your life into the stuff, I always capitalize it in my head, if the stuff has become symbolic of who you are, that stuff is what your entire life has been about. When it's gone in the blink of an eye, whether it is because of foreclosure or because of Katrina or an earthquake or a tornado or whatever, you're devastated.
Yeah, who are you? You don't know who you are.
It's all gone. I mean, it's gone. Just that quick, it's gone. Whereas the relationships with people endure.
Right.
And they endure past death.
They do. Yeah.
So, the thing is that in a sense, you put yourself in a safe bank. Whereas, if it's in the stuff, it's in a bank that's going to fail or can fail at any moment.
Right. Interesting.
So, yeah, it's just one of those things when I listen to you talking about the relationships and whatnot, it's like, it's banking on something besides the stuff.
Yeah,
and I think, downsizing my entire life made me realize that, how important really is the stuff? How much can you do without?
I once went traveling for about 17 months or so, a long time, and I put all my stuff in storage, and when I came back and it was time for me to find another place to live and get reconnected to it, I thought I would be glad to see it, and I could have cared less about. There was one object in this whole storage bin that I cared about, which was a little sculpture my grandma had made of me when I was a girl. It's the only thing I cared about, really. It's like I could use everything. Like, I used the pots and pans, and I used the furniture again, just my clothes and stuff. But had I lost them, it really would not have mattered. But this one little sculpture that my grandma made when I was a girl, like that, I was like, oh, that's good to see. But that was about my relationship with my grandma, So that was a great lesson of like, yeah, whatever, stuff. It's
I guess in the past I had lost everything so quickly before. I'd had a fire when my daughter was a baby, lost everything then. Losing my son made that look like nothing.
Yeah, I bet it is.
And then, after Katrina, the news that was coming out of the city was so inaccurate. I'd been led to believe that pretty much everything was underwater, which meant all my stuff was gone again. And I'd left with 3 days' worth of clothes, just like everybody else under the sun. So, I was looking at that and going, okay, we're going to start over again. It was just like, more like a groan, because no pots and pans, no clothes, no nothing again.
Right.
But was it devastating? Not like it was to people that had banked on that stuff, you might say. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the same way for me. And like I said, I probably had the least to lose, even financial investment. And yet, I was the one that kept everything. I didn't lose anything. Not my job, not my place to live, not the stuff in it, nothing. I was like, well, we were gone for a month, now we're back, and that was it.
Yeah.
So, A, I realized I was very fortunate, and B, it was like, it just kind of brought home that whole stuff issue again. So, the material parts, and even in terms of the gardening, every gardener knows you can plant that plant all over again.
Right, all the bugs or the whatevers that happen to it. And it was interesting, as you were talking, I was just thinking it's interesting how something that's so material, so, it's made out of stuff, a garden, but it sort of takes you to this place where you can understand something about transcendence and how everything is impermanent, including your body and your life and everything in it, your relationships, things pass. I think there's also something in our cultural stuffness that's resisting that reality of things come and go. They just do. Things, people, circumstances, everything changes. So it kind of takes you to that more an acceptance of things come and go. And even if we come to this lifestyle with this desire to heal the world or repair the world or be part of the change, the truth is we can't save the world. We can't save it. We'll never alleviate suffering totally, or inequity, or drought, or famine, or war. All these things are just part of what it means to live in this funny, amazing planet. And I think
we can't save the world, but we can do a whole lot for our own little corner. And maybe
we can. I mean, there's some control we have, but mostly we're not in charge.
No.
We're really not in charge. That's what I see.
But, like I said, we can clean up our corner. We can plant some flowers and some plants and some trees. And it looks a lot better, and it becomes more alive, and it spreads outward. And even if the flood or the fire, the earthquake or the tornado comes, you can plant flowers and plants and trees all over again.
Yeah, you can.
And, something about gardening says everything has a season. Everything occurs in a cycle. And, nothing's forever.
Nope.
So it kind of does train you for what reality is. American society has worshipped youth for the last 60 years.
Yeah, we've really been separate from reality. We really have. Post-World War II.
And the fact of life is everybody gets old.
Everybody
I look
dies.
in the mirror and I wonder how in the heck my mother got in there.
I know. I just had a birthday that was like, the number was extremely ridiculous. And I was like, no way, I can't really relate to this. But in fact, it was true. You know, it was just...
Yeah, you know, my daughter's going to have a birthday in a couple of weeks, and I'm still wondering how she got older than me.
Yeah, there you go. I know, I just saw some people for lunch today who've known me since I was born, and I was just like, really? Can you relate to this number being attached to me? And they're like, no, we really can't relate to that. It's too old.
Well, yeah, and I have to admit, you know, people think I'm joking when I say, how did my daughter get older than me? It's like you stop aging mentally at a point, early adulthood. You may mature and you may grow and you may everything else, but you don't, you know, you don't become 50 in that mindset.
No, you don't.
So, you know, when all of a sudden your daughter's turning 30 and you're looking and you're going, how did she get older than me? I'm 22.
There you go.
You know, yeah. You know, and it's sort of a mental, like, oh, well. And then when I look in the mirror, I do see my mother. I don't see me. I just like, I don't have gray hair. You know, yeah. So, yeah, I laugh at that. I have to laugh at it. I realize how old I am some mornings when I try to move too quick, when I try to do things that I'm no longer capable of doing. So, yeah, you know, I get my wake-up calls that my body is older, but my mind's no older. You know, I can still have a good temper tantrum.
Oh, there you go.
I practice regularly. Yeah, I practice regularly. Yeah. So, you know, everybody needs to let that inner child out, even if it's just for an occasional tantrum.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So, we are now kind of running out of time, so you want to real quick tell everybody about your website again?
Okay, the website for the book, www.urban-homesteading.org, urban-homesteading.org. You can buy the book there. You can learn more about the book. You can ask us questions. You can write to us. You can tell us how much you love the book. You can order more books at our website.
Pretty cool. Folks, unfortunately, we have run out of time, and as usual, it's been all too quickly. It doesn't seem like 2 hours has passed, does it, Rachel?
No. Thank you so much.
I hope that tonight's program has brought everyone plenty of food for thought, as well as more illumination for the journey towards truth. Join us again next week as we continue our journey and hear about something else entirely different. It's sure to be another program that's just as thought-provoking. You've been listening to The Dawn of Shades, and I'm Gia Scott, and good night.
Thank you.